Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is Election Edge. It's a Tuesday, 6 o'clock on the East Coast, 3 o'clock on the West Coast. Happy to have you with us today. And we now have the Democratic vice presidential nominee, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. Walz has an interesting background. He was governor of Minnesota. He was formerly a congressman from Minnesota. He spent 20 years in the National Guard. And Walz is very similar ideologically to Vice President Harris. Now, there was a lot of sort of intrigue going into this. There were a list of 6 names that the Democrats could have chosen from. And it's narrowly came down to either Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania and Governor Walz of Minnesota. Folks, you got to go back to the 1800s for the last time a governor was named vice president and they won on the ticket. So the question that both Republicans and Democrats were asking today is, why did the vice president pick Walz? He is virtually unknown outside the state of Minnesota. 71% of the American people have never heard of him or have no opinion. So don't get caught up in opinion polls about what you think about Governor Walz at this point, because, frankly, that overwhelming majority do not know who he is. We'll talk a little bit about his record as we get into the show. But the question everybody was asking today, after the announcement came earlier this morning, why Walz and why not Shapiro? And if you can believe mainstream media reports, apparently when the vice president went to sleep last night, she had not made a decision, woke up this morning and decided that the pick was going to be Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. So where did that leave Josh Shapiro? Well, it left him nowhere. So obviously, just like Democrats do, and folks, they are excellent at this. They are really good. Once a decision is made by the Democratic Party, whether it is a vote, a policy, an election, a nomination, and you can criticize their policies all you want, but Democrats fall in line. There is no criticism, and they get behind their nominee. So, right on cue today, the mainstream media began what I call the glorification process of Governor Tim from Minnesota. How great he was, how well he's been as governor, military service, straight shooting guy. But when they tried to pull him off as a centrist, and we'll get into a little bit about that, that was a little bit too much of a stretch. So, commentators left and right were saying, well, why Walz instead of Shapiro? Well, I think the answer is pretty obvious. Let's sort of compare the two. Walz comes from Minnesota. Minnesota hasn't gone Republican in a very, very long time. It's close. I think in the last election, Biden beat Trump by 2 points in Minnesota. But Minnesota is traditionally a blue state. So picking a governor of a blue state, did that really help him a whole lot? Probably not. I mean, it's not going to affect Minnesota in the big picture. Now, what will Walz's effect be on the Democratic blue wall states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin? Well, obviously too soon to rate. It's day one. But let's examine why he got the nod over someone that many Democrats were cheering for, and frankly, a lot of Republicans were fearful of. And that's Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. He only has like a 60% plus approval rating in the state. I've seen some polls 65% approval rating. So a lot of analysts on the Republican side were very concerned that Shapiro would be named to the ticket because as this race is settling out, and we're going to see ups and downs in the polls. We'll get into the polling later. But it's become apparent that in all likelihood, whoever wins Pennsylvania will be the 47th president of the United States. So logically, if you're on the Republican side, you're sitting here, you've already seen polls tighten. Yes, that's pretty obvious, and we'll get into that. But if Pennsylvania is the key, why would you not select a dynamic, young, terrific speaker, by all reason a center-left, and folks on the Democratic Party, when I say center-left, that's their definition of moderate, okay? Why would you not pick Shapiro over Walz when you need to win Pennsylvania? Even people on the left, such as former Republican Joe Scarborough of MSNBC fame, he was somewhat perplexed about why Harris would choose Walz instead of Shapiro for the reasons we've talked about. 65% approval rating in his home state. Pennsylvania right now, Donald Trump is in most polls is up 1 or 2 points. So if Donald Trump's up 1 or 2 points in Pennsylvania, and it may be a little tighter than that, who knows? Why would you not go with Shapiro? And what did Walz bring to the table to help win Pennsylvania? The answer is very simple. The Hamas wing of the Democratic Party was the deciding factor in Vice President Harris choosing Walz over Shapiro. Let me sort of translate that for, as Rush Limbaugh used to say, for those of you in Rio Linda. Josh Shapiro is Jewish. The far left-wing radicals in the Democratic Party who desperately want to win Michigan could not risk the political fallout of naming a Jewish man as the number 2 on the ticket. That's just raw political facts. It's not even debatable. So here you have the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party, and do not kid yourself, folks. When these college students go back to school, which is going to happen in the next couple weeks, and when the Democratic convention is going on in Chicago, you will see these left-wing activists protesting in Chicago. You will see them on college campuses. And do the Democrats really, really want to have a Jewish man as the number 2 on the ticket when the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party wanted no part of Josh Shapiro? So much so to the point where a commentator on CNN, Van Jones, came out today and he said, I'm a little concerned. And I'm thinking, well, why is Van Jones concerned? Well, because the reaction among Republicans was somewhat gleeful. Republicans knew that if Josh Shapiro was selected, the odds of them winning Pennsylvania would decline. Now, you can say, well, Mark, would the odds of winning Michigan go up? Maybe. But no guarantee on that. No guarantee that Shapiro could have pushed Harris over the finish line in Pennsylvania either. We don't know that. But what we do know is Tim Walz is to the left of Governor Shapiro. Now, these things are ranked by, the policy positions that the various governors take. Walz was head of the Democratic Governors Association, meaning I think we have 50 governors. I think 26 are Republican, 24 are Democrat. Walz was the president of the Democratic Governors Association. Apparently, he didn't really know Vice President Harris that well, but they got to know each other in July. And apparently they clicked pretty well. So, as media reports leaked out that Harris was going to be picking either Shapiro or Walz, a lot of the political establishment types, if you will, were saying, well, this is a layup. It's going to be Shapiro. Betting markets probably had Shapiro 65, 70%, Walz the difference. But last night, those odds started to change a little bit. And again, betting markets aren't always predictable when it comes to politics, but it started to shift. Now, again, if you believe the media reports, and I happen to think there may be some truth to these, I really believe the vice president was being straightforward when she said she made her decision this morning. Could she have decided last night and wanted to sleep on it? Sure, it's pretty normal. But make no mistake about it. With Kamala Harris, you have among the most further left wing of the Democratic Party. Again, when she ran for president back in 2020 against Joe Biden, she ran to the left of Biden. Now, obviously, as we're well aware, she didn't get any delegates because she dropped out before Iowa. That didn't stop her from being named vice president. But, and we've been playing this commercial this week, and we're going to play it again today, of Harris's positions that she's taken over the years. So, back to the VP pick. In making that decision, it's become crystal clear to us that, Walz is to the left of Shapiro, and Walz is a little bit to the right of Harris. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, hey, Mark, you always have a guest on the show. What are you doing today? You doing a solo the whole show? No, folks. Our guest had some technical difficulties, so I want to bring him into the mix here. He's a terrific guy. Daren, are you there? Do we have a connection with Daren Williams? Yes, we do.
How you doing, Mark? It's
Daren,
good to see you.
Yeah, welcome to Election Edge, Daren. Happy to have you with me, folks. We finally got the technical difficulties ironed out. So, Daren, welcome to the show. Daren, you've heard my commentary about Governor Shapiro and Governor Walz. Give me your impression of the selections, how it came down. Again, my opinion was I don't think the Democrats wanted to affect the Hamas wing of the party, but give me your thoughts now that the selection has been solidified.
Well, honestly, I think that Walz is a perfect pick for her. And what I mean by that is that he represents everything that she stands for: LGBTQ, gun control, more gun control, allowing legals to have free reign over whether it's driver's license, voting, those things. It's very, how would I say, focused on, it's closer to her. Walz is closer to her than what Shapiro would be, of course. I think this is a perfect opportunity for the Republican Party because here you can solidify two groups of people. You can go to the Jewish community and say, listen, there was a perfect opportunity for the Democrats, but you see how they are anti-Semitic completely. And then you also go to blacks and you say, well, look at it this way. Here you had a person at one point that said she was an Indian, and then now she's running as a black woman. So she's flip-flopping on everything. But for her to pick this guy, it's the perfect pick for her. And it's a perfect pick for us conservatives because we can utilize this in a way of really garnering votes on, like I said, on when it comes to Black Americans and when it comes to Jewish Americans. So am I surprised that she picked him? No, absolutely not. I would have been surprised she picked Shapiro. just for the fact of, like you said, Hamas, and just for the fact that she is so radical and so anti-Semitic. It's it would have been strange for her to even pick Shapiro, in my estimation.
I'm going to agree with you there, Daren. So you caught us, Daren. We're right at break time right now. But here's what we're going to do, folks. We're going to take our first break. But when we come back, Daren and I are going to really analyze where things go from here, because as he correctly stated, he is to the left of where Shapiro was. There's no doubt about it. He's not as left as Kamala Harris, but boy, they're awful close. So we're going to break that down for you when we come back. See you in about 90 seconds.
Former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
Every American needs this historical DVD keepsake. Flynn delivered the truth, whatever the cost. Hand signed by General Michael Flynn. Order now at the Patriot TV store. Use promo code PTV at checkout to get special savings. The Patriot TV store, a secure, hassle-free shopping experience.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most precious assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott Precious Metals at 720-605-3900. That's 720-605-3900.
And we're back. Hey, folks, pick up the phone and call Dr. Kirk Elliott. They are a great company. Gold prices are near record highs. The stock market down 1,000, up 600, a lot of uncertainty. Gold and silver prices are moving. Everyone should have a small portion of gold and silver in their portfolio. Kirk Elliott's been a friend of our company for a long time. We highly recommend him. They're a great company to do business with. So let's support the Patriot team here. Daren, back to you. You made some really key points right before we went to break. And just to give you a little intro here, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about New Journey PAC, and then let's talk about those positions that Governor Walz has taken, because based on what you rattled off there, those are not moderate positions by any stretch of the imagination.
Right, they're very radical. So, New Journey PAC is a political action committee by James Golden. Most people will know James Golden as his nickname, Bo Snerdley, from the Rush Limbaugh show. God bless Rush Limbaugh, great American patriot. But Mr. James Golden decided to create a PAC that would kind of reiterate the importance of conservatism towards Black Americans. It's unfortunate that many Black Americans have fallen into the routine of believing that Democrats really believe and support them, which they don't. And so, with that being said, I am a part of his endorsements as well as policies director for the PAC. So it's been an honor working with him, as well as Audrey Pruitt, who is the president. And hopefully, this will be an election to remember. It's a very unique election that we're having. Democracy on the Democrat side is not really winning out, considering that this was a coronation for Kamala Harris. But things happen. This is what the founding fathers knew that was going to happen. And so we relish in it and we move forward. But I would say, as far as, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead. Go ahead.
But as far as, this pick that Kamala Harris chose, like I said, it's the perfect pick for her. And I think what'll end up happening is that she will lead this person further to the left. I mean, everything that this person has done for the state of his state has been extremely far left. It has been. And she's just that extra step to push him even further. I will say this, as far as their strategy for a campaign, it's going to be a basement campaign, as what Joe Biden did. They're not going to confront Trump. They're not going to confront JD, not in person, anyways. I mean, you saw that with the NABJ, National
Association of Black Journalists. Yes,
right. She was supposed to be there, but she didn't show up. So it's going to be a fake and hand slide and just continuously be in the basement and of course call names as they always do. And that's how they're going to try to win this election.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I mean, she hasn't held a press conference, a news conference, had a meeting with reporters. Yes, she's gone out on stage like she's doing today with Governor Walz, in Philadelphia, courting that predominantly African-American vote. And she's not meeting with the mainstream media. Now, folks, there's an old saying in politics. When your opponent is stumbling or making mistakes, let them keep making the mistakes. So, Daren, I want to go, before I talk about President Trump, and we'll dive into that a little bit. I do want to address some of these policies that you referenced earlier that Walz has taken the position on. And folks, these are not mainstream positions. Driver's license for illegal immigrants? What's mainstream about that? I can't think of anything. He's for the Green New Deal. He's got a position in the state of Minnesota where by 2040, everything has to be electrified. No more natural gas. By 2040. Very big on transgenders. Okay, we'll see a little clip about that later. When the riots took place, the BLM riots I'm talking about now, I mean, his city, Minneapolis, became a war zone.
It was on fire.
Now,
yeah, very much so.
I mean, yes, fires everywhere. So ideologically, folks, the Democratic Party may try to refer to him as a moderate, but I believe, Daren, that Kamala Harris picked him very similar, I think, to how Trump picked J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is ideologically very in tune with Donald Trump. And I think this fantasy on the Democratic side about, well, we're going to have Shapiro to sort of balance out the ticket and help us in Pennsylvania. Boy, I mean, she went the other way. Now, we don't know whether this selection will end up helping her or hurting her. I mean, it's day one. We have no polling data or anything like that. But do not kid yourself, folks. This is clearly someone to the left of where Shapiro was. And Daren, let me ask you this. I mean, do you think literally the left wing of this party, they really tried to undercut Shapiro? I was surprised by how the Democratic Party went after one of their own. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, this is my thing. I think the Democrats, if you want to use a perfect term, they're vampires. They're bloodsuckers. So they will suck the life out of anybody that they have in their party. They will use them to the bitter end. Elijah Cummings, I remember them talking about, oh, he's passing legislation on his deathbed, which probably should be the last thing he's doing. You look at Joe Biden. They rolled Joe Biden out for as long as they possibly could. They knew he had dementia. They knew he was a problem. But of course, in 2020, he was the next best thing to them getting the election. So what they do is they utilize people. And so Shapiro, I guess at the present moment, did not fit the bill that they have in reference to their party. They're looking to take this as far as they can. They're thinking we cannot risk having Trump in office again. And if we possibly get back in office, we need to go full steam ahead. And that's what they will do. And I'm sorry to say, I say this very candidly. If Kamala Harris gets back in office, the first thing they will do is enlarge the Supreme Court, which basically would go in and remove so many rights and privileges that we have as American citizens. And one of them is the Second Amendment. They will immediately get rid of the Second Amendment, and they will pursue other avenues. They will, as they're doing right now, weaponize things even more. So for her to pick Walz, again, it is a strategic move to be able not to have anyone in the way questioning what they're going to do. And I think at some point, Shapiro would have gotten to the point of saying, okay, hey, we're going a little too far here. I think we need to back it up. But with Walz he's a puppet. He's like, what was the guy that Hillary Clinton had? Tim Kaine.
Tim Kaine.
Pretty much the same person. Yeah, pretty much the same person. He would have rolled over backwards for Hillary Clinton. And that's what they picked Walz to do.
So as the Republicans are trying to define Kamala Harris and Walz, okay, how would you suggest, Daren, that they focus on that? I mean, if you're Trump's campaign manager, and let's sort of state the race where it is right now. When Joe Biden was the opponent, Trump was leading by 3 to 4 points. And we'll get into the polling averages a little bit later. We want to talk the issues first. But everyone, I think, can acknowledge the polls have tightened significantly. Some even show Harris in the lead. But Trump is still leading battleground states. So effectively, this race is effectively tied. Daren, what would you recommend the Trump campaign focus on now that they know who both of their opponents are?
I think the best thing for the Trump campaign to focus on is Trump's 4 years. I mean, his 4 years were epic. And I loved Ronald Reagan. I thought Ronald Reagan was brilliant, but Trump outdid Ronald Reagan. He just did. What Trump needs to do and what JD needs to do is to focus on his 4 years. And then contrast that to the 4 years of Biden and say that Kamala Harris was under his watch. I mean, the border czar. That's a prime example. That's probably one of the best examples ever that they need to pounce on continuously and drill it into the American people, particularly Black Americans, because when you have illegals coming over here, they're not putting them in Martha's Vineyard, they're not putting them in Georgetown, they're putting them in majority Black areas. And so Blacks it's in competition with them. And so, I don't promote welfare and I don't promote subsidies or affirmative action, but my point is, if you've been here longer, then maybe you should get it first, but they're not. And so those are the things that really need to hit home. Trump has this unique way of, saying certain things that maybe only a few people can understand, like me. But for the most part, he needs to just focus on what he did for the Jewish community, what he did for the Black community, what he did for whites in general, what he did for the American people. It was absolutely fantastic. We were all independent with Trump. I mean, we were the leaders of the free world. Everyone was afraid of us, not in fear that we're going to bomb them, but in fear that, if you come at us, we're going to protect ourselves. And we want the same thing for Israel. We're partners with Israel. And so the Democrat Party treats Israel as if it is the terrorist, which there's no possible way of proving that they're the terrorists. They telegraph their punches, which it's amazing to me. They'll tell you, we're going to bomb you in 20 minutes, so you need to be aware. And then they bring in, and that bombing is through defense. They've been attacked. But they bring in, emergency vehicles. They help the people that have been, injured and stuff like that. Hamas is a totally different animal in comparison to that. So all Trump needs to do is continue on that mission of pounding out what he has done or what he did in those 4 years and what Biden has totally destroyed within the 4 years that he's been in office. There's no tricks to it.
Daren, I'm in complete agreement with you, and I've been consistently saying that. When Trump asked the question, are you better now than you were 4 years ago? Most people say, no, I'm not. And we'll get into some of the reasons why. We're going to talk about a little bit about the economy and polling, and I want to dive into something else Daren was talking about the effect of Black voters on this election, because it's a stark difference between how Black women are voting and how Black men are voting. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in about 90 seconds, and we're going to tackle those issues and opportunities that President Trump has to regain his footing in this race.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, my name is General Mike Flynn, and I'm here to talk about a limited time offer of subscriptions to Patriot.tv and how you can become a member of our Patriot Defenders subscription club and become a member of Patriot.tv. Really, it's America's network. I call it the home of truth. And you can do that for only $9.99 a month. It's a great deal by itself, but what I'm going to walk you through here in these next few seconds is a couple of package deals that we have that are unbelievable. The next membership was the annual membership at $99 that you can save. Right away, you save $20 if you come in at the annual subscription rate. The best deal that I think that people ought to seriously consider is the 2-year membership at $159. And it includes a special edition of my recently released documentary, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. So along with the 2-year membership, the 2-year subscription will send you a DVD combo of the film, plus an option to stream the movie online, as well as exclusive interviews of Tucker Carlson, Devin Nunes, and myself. So go to the home of truth, right? Go to Patriot.tv today, sign up, seriously consider the 2-year subscription rate. It's an unbelievable savings. I think it's a total savings of about $70 from just signing up on a monthly or a annual basis. So thank you very much for your support. Patriot.tv is America's new network. Thank you.
And we're back. Thank you, General Flynn, for that ringing endorsement of Patriot TV. Folks, go up and click Patriot Defenders. We have great content for you, whether it's going to be the monthly basis, 1 year or 2 year, where you get a bunch of goodies. Great things. You'll be supporting Patriot TV, and it'll allow programming like this to continue to deliver without the commentary of the left-wing mainstream media. Okay, Daren, here's a question I wanted to pose to you because we were talking about African-American voters. I get the fact that Kamala Harris is identified as a black woman. I'm not going down that rabbit hole, whether she's black, Indian. It's meaningless at this point. But here's the question I have for you. It does appear there's a big gap, Daren, between black men who are seen increasingly more aligned with Donald Trump, I'm not talking a 50% level, but a much greater percentage of black men, if you believe in some of these polling numbers, appear to support Trump, whereas the percentage of black women is still very low. Is it because, and by the way, it doesn't matter whether you're white, black, Asian, whatever, the numbers that Harris had, 54% of women supported her, 45% supported Trump, and identical numbers, 54% of men support Trump, 45% women. So, Daren, is there an opportunity here for Donald Trump to break through and get higher percentage? Because if he can gain a higher percentage of the black vote, he is going to carry 1 or 2 or 3 of those blue wall states.
Well, I will say this. If President Trump were to call me and ask me my opinion on how to get more black males to vote for him, I would tell him this. I would say that the black family in America is the only family that has a woman being head of the household. When you look at white families, it's the male. When you look at Asian families, it's the male. When you look at Hispanic families, it's the male. The black family has a black woman as the head of the household. That's strategic, all right? And now she's black. In 2016, I think she was Indian. And now they're calling, I think it was the Alpha PAC, requested that all black men should stand behind Kamala Harris and vote for her. The Democrat Party literally hates and despises black men. If they didn't, let's put it that way, they would have never broken up the black family with the welfare state or with subsidies or anything of that nature. So when you look at the Democrat Party, the ones who benefit the most in reference to blacks are black females as opposed to black males. This needs to be articulated by Trump or by JD or by any conservative, by any Republican that's out there that is seeing this clearly. The Democrat Party is not even interested in black men. They use black men as calamities like BLM did. And this is a perfect opportunity for Trump to step out there, or whoever that supports Trump, he's the spokesperson, to say, listen, for 60 years, the Democrat Party has been pushing black men down, and this is an opportunity for you to map out your own destiny And the way you do that is to go against them, the people that have been pushing against you for so long. So I would recommend that he would pursue it in that form.
And I've seen some polling, Darren, that says particularly young black men are gravitating towards Donald Trump for some of the reasons that you talked about. And when they look at their lives were better under Donald Trump than it is under Joe Biden. And, here's the perplexing thing. When you look at polling numbers, Donald Trump has massive leads when it comes to who's better equipped to handle the economy. Who will do better in the economy? Is it Donald Trump presidency or Kamala Harris? Trump leads by 20 points. And when it comes to border security, he's up by like 50 or 60 points on who would do better at the border. So Darren, I submit this to you. We had a massive 3-day downturn in the stock market. Now everybody doesn't own stocks. I get that. But we got some statistics out today. Credit card debt in this country, credit card debt, $1.14 trillion. That cuts across all lines. Doesn't matter, black, Asian, American, anything. It's Americans in general. That number is the highest ever. And folks, the average interest rate on that credit card debt's 21%. I mean, you've got to be Houdini to get out of a 21% interest rate on a loan. Automobile loans that are at an all-time high. And here's a staggering figure for you. We have close to $18 trillion of debt, and that includes mortgages, cars, credit cards in this country. Put that on top of $35 trillion of debt that the federal government has, and you're sitting here saying, well, if something happens in the economy and we trend towards a potential recession, there's no bullets in the government budget to be able to bail us out this time. So, Darren, I would submit to you that it's if Donald Trump wants to win this election, he needs to focus on the issues with which people trust him more than they trust Kamala Harris. And I'm in complete agreement with you. I mean, when you have advantages like that, and just like Ronald Reagan did, you can look at your opponent and say, were you better off 4 years ago than you are now? Well, in Reagan's case, people were better off. In Joe Biden's America, Kamala Harris's America, no. And Darren, another thing I think he has to do, and we talked about this, Democrats fall in line lock, stop. I mean, once they set on the policy, there is no disagreement. Because when they vote in the Senate, it does, other than Joe Manchin, I'll exclude him. But for the most part, every Democratic senator, whether you're considered liberal or centrist liberal, they all vote the same way. So if the head of the ticket, Kamala Harris, is to the left, and Governor Walz, as vice president, is going to be following her directives, then Darren, economically, you're 100% correct. Donald Trump needs to talk about pocketbook issues. And again, in my opinion, he needs to get away from alienating a governor in a state that he has to win. Your thoughts on that? I mean, am I going down the right path here with President Trump, or am I leading him the wrong way here?
Well, no, I think you're going down the correct path. I mostly dabble in private industry, and you look at these politicians, and within a year of them working in the private industry, they would have been fired by now. But you have Trump, who's a businessman, and the whole country is a business. I mean, you look at GDP, you look at workforce participation, you look at unemployment, you look at the stock market. All these things revolve around a business, a corporation. Trump is a master in having a corporation and running it. He's been called the art of the deal. He's been called the art of the comeback kid. He's all of that. And so what we're seeing here, and of course, the Democrats like to make everything a social experiment. It's all about pie in the sky and a utopia, and we're all having wonderful times. But the reality of it is that there are trade-offs. All right, that's what life's all about, is trade-offs. And either you can have a social experiment where everybody is kind of floating around trying to figure out what their existence is, or you can have it where people are really putting their hands on tangible things like economics, like their pocketbook, like gas prices going down, having food on their table. things of that nature, being oil independent, which we were, which actually reduced the deficit greatly. We weren't asking for oil from other people. We were creating things here in America. We weren't shipping them over, making things so expensive here that we had to ship it over. And then when they brought it back in, it would be more costly. So yeah, Trump needs to focus on the economy, what it was when he was in office, and then what the economy is while Kamala Harris is in office. I think I heard her said on day one, we're going to go after corporations on price gouging. Well, you're already in office. Why don't you do it now? They're not going to ever do it. All this is just lip service that she's giving to people each and every day to make them feel good and believe that she's doing something amazing. She's not doing anything amazing.
Madam Producer, if you could pull up that clip from the Pennsylvania ad that talks about Kamala Harris's position. It's a short clip, but we want all of our viewers and listeners to hear, because as Daren said earlier in the show, when someone says something, believe what they're telling you. So, Madam Producer, if we can cue that up.
Kamala Harris is inspiring and very capable. The more people get to know her, they're going to be particularly impressed by her ability.
The nonpartisan GovTrack has rated you as the most liberal senator.
I am prepared to get rid of the filibuster to pass a Green New Deal. There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking.
Would you ban offshore drilling?
Yes.
What is the solution for voters in the fossil fuel industry?
Giving the workers an ability to transition. We're not going to treat people who are undocumented across the border as criminals. That's correct.
Raise your hand if you think it should be a civil offense rather than a crime to cross the border without documentation.
Abolish ICE.
Yeah.
Is that a position you agree with?
And we need to probably think about starting from scratch.
Outdated, it is wrong-headed thinking to think that the only way you're going to get communities to be safe is to put more police officers on the street.
Would you support changing the dietary guidelines?
Yes.
The food pyramid. What people
yes.
To reduce red meat specifically.
Yes.
People who are convicted in prison, like the Boston Marathon bomber, on death row, people who are convicted of sexual assault, they should be able to vote?
I think we should have that conversation.
We have to have a buyback program, and I support a mandatory buyback program.
So for people out there who like their insurance, well, they don't get to keep it.
Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
I am opposed to any policy that would deny any human being public health, period.
The more people get to know her, they're going to be particularly impressed by her ability.
We did it, Joe.
Daren, if that's not from her own lips to our ears, I mean, as you said, when someone says something, believe them.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. There's a book, I can't remember the author. It's called Yellow Dog Democrat. And the whole philosophy behind a yellow dog Democrat, it doesn't make a difference what color the dog is as long as it has a D behind its name. She can say that we'll shoot up a whole town and people will still vote for her because she's a Democrat. I mean, that's how much brainwashing that they've been introduced to. It's not about thinking. It's not about evaluating the policies. It's not about analyzing, what has happened in the past and what they've done, what they plan on doing in the future. It is all about identity politics. If she's a black woman, you being black, you got to vote for her. If she's a Democrat, even though she has crappy policies, you have to vote for her. And at sometimes that can be on the right side, but more so it is on the left. It is a, how would I put it? It's a slave mentality. And I'm not just talking about for blacks, liberal whites as well, liberal Asians, liberal Jews. It is what they believe in and what they will die at, because yellow dog Democrats is their philosophy. It doesn't make a difference who they are. It doesn't, as long as the person's a Democrat.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that. And look, folks, we're spelling out some of the issues here that Donald Trump's going to have to deal with, because like Daren's saying, yellow dog Democrats, it's a realism out there, because one thing we have to do on our side of the ledger, folks, recognize that on identity politics, they are very, very good at what they do, which is why, as Daren and I have suggested here on the show today, it is critical for Donald Trump to talk about the economic issues, to talk about how the border was secure under Trump, to talk about how Look at what's going on tonight. Israel is under potential attack from Iran. They're already in a two-front war with Hezbollah in the north, fighting in Gaza to the east. I mean, would this ever have happened under President Trump? No. You've got the Russians and the Ukrainians continuing 2.5 years. People can say what they want about Putin and Trump, but we didn't have constant wars when Trump was president. All right, so those are his key points. All right, now here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our final break, but when we come back, we're going to go over some polling numbers. Daren and I are going to break those down for you, and then we'll give you what the real state of the race is right now. We'll be back shortly.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever.
For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great.
With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most precious assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott Precious Metals at 720-605-3900. That's 720-605-3900.
And we're back. All right, let me get into some polling data with you so that we can put this in perspective. Now, polling is a snapshot in time, and as we've seen, really over the past week to 10 days, polls can move up, polls can move down, but what you're looking for here is a trend. And, we have seen a clear trend to where Vice President Harris has been making up ground, and as of today, this is current information, folks, hot off the press, literally as we're on the air live, Vice President Harris has a 0.5 point lead over President Trump. Those numbers are 47.4 to 46.9. Now, let me tell you why that is statistically significant. Donald Trump was ahead of Joe Biden by about 3.5, 4 points. So there has been a noticeable shift here. But let me put it in perspective for you. Polling has been accurate sometimes, and it's been inaccurate. In the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton went into election night, at this point in the campaign, same day, 90-some days before election, Hillary Clinton was up 6.9%. She went into election night with a 99% chance to win, and she lost. In 2020, Joe Biden at this identical point in time was up 6.4%. He ended up winning that race by a little over 4 points. So let's put it in perspective. Donald Trump, Real Clear Politics average, and they average all the recent polling by major accredited polling firms. 0.5 point lead. And let me give you a couple of individual ones here. Morning Consult poll, they're a well-respected company. They've got Harris 48-44. New York Times, say what you will about the New York Times, but they're fairly well respected for polling. They have Trump up 48-47. Okay, so, a clear difference there. Battleground states, despite the 0.5 point lead by Vice President Harris, Trump is up an average of 1.5 points in those battleground states. Why is that critical? Because you need 270 to win. So, Daren, based on these polling numbers that we've just talked about here, it would appear to me, despite that Trump being slightly behind, he is in much, much better shape at this point in the election than he was in either 2016 and 2020. Your thoughts on these polling numbers as we've just talked about them in real time?
Well, I think what you said is very true. Polling numbers are just a snapshot. I mean, tomorrow they might be a different polling number. It's one of these things where, for me, probably that's one of the things I really do not focus in on. I focus in on the message, and I think most people, sensible people out here, everyday working class citizens, are focused on the message. Yeah, they'll glance at a poll here and there, and they'll take into stock or consideration. But when they're voting on the issues. They're not voting on, oh, well, man, that poll says this, so I got to follow what the poll says. I think people are smart enough to know that you take polls with a grain of salt. Just like you said with Hillary Clinton. She was supposed to win 1,000%, and she didn't. My thoughts are different on 2020's election results, but nonetheless, we're in 2024. And so, I think it's always going to be perceived as a close race for excitement reasons. I mean, that's how these polling firms work. To have something that is so far out, it could be detrimental. But for me, I think if Trump were to stick with the issues of how he has really done an amazing job in the 4 years that he was in, as well as what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, the terrible job that they've done, I think the polling numbers and I think everything will fall in line for him and JD perfectly.
I agree with you, Daren. And again, the point I was trying to emphasize here is not say one way or another who's going to win, because it is just a snapshot. But for all you Trump voters, yes, should you be concerned with the momentum the vice president has? Sure, because it's real. And the mainstream media is just coronating Kamala Harris. And again, if it was Trump, they would be criticizing him for not meeting with the media. With her, it's business as usual. Like Daren was referring to, the basement strategy. Now, it's not a basement, but she has been avoiding the press. So we'll see when that comes to bear. But again, just looking at those numbers, at this same point in time, the last two elections, Trump was down 6, he's down 0.5 point. And it was by definition, Democrats were so down and out with Joe Biden. And literally the reason he was forced out of this race was not only was he down 3 or 4 points to Trump, but his polling numbers were cratering because people realized they'd been lied to over the past couple of years, that Joe Biden, unfortunately, and I say this as an American, we never want to see our president in mental decline. I mean, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, he is the president. Now, you can ask yourself, well, if he wasn't qualified to run, why is he staying president? Well, he is. We have to accept that. It is what it is for right now, and that's not going to change unless he really, really deteriorates further. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of Democrats came home, and that is one of the things pushing her poll numbers up. So as Daren was saying, you look back at that last election, Trump got 46.9% of the vote in 2020. That's about where he's sitting, right now. He's a little higher, 47.4. And I have said this on many shows. If he, as Daren and I have talked about, if he can focus on these issues, ultimately, Daren, most of these elections ultimately come down to the economy. And we're staring right now at GDP forecast for the second half of the year at a paltry 1.2%. Inflation's still running at 3%. Daren, I've got to believe that when people go to those polling booths, and again, I know the Democrats are masters at identity politics, and we're going to hear all that, but ultimately when someone goes to vote, Daren, don't most people vote their economic interest of the person they think is going to lead them to the promised land and out of this high inflation that's run 20% under Biden? They may not care about the national debt, $35 trillion, or maybe they have credit card debt, maybe they don't. But they do know one thing, their wages aren't keeping up with inflation. Daren, will that ultimately be a deciding thing if Donald Trump really gets back focused on it.
Well, I will say this again. I think the normal people would consider their economic status. Unfortunately, most Democrats are not. They're willing. I've even spoken to Democrats that said, we're willing to suffer it out economically, just as long as President Trump doesn't get in office, just as long as there's a Republican that doesn't get in office. That right there is commitment. I mean, it's commitment to foolishness, but it is commitment. So, but yes, I think normal people are going to be looking at their economic state, and they're going to figure out, hey, listen, 4 years ago when Trump was in office, I didn't have these problems. Now I'm having these problems, so we need to turn back. I'll give you a perfect example of what I mean by that. There's a city called Baltimore City, an amazing city, probably one of the most important cities because it's Fort McHenry. I mean, that's where the ports are. Baltimore has been under Democrat rule since 1950 something. Each Democrat, except for probably one person, each Democrat was horrible for the city, absolutely hideous. But they continue to vote for Democrats, and it continues to get worse. They know what their economic status is. They know what their educational status is. They know what the crime rate is. They know what the unemployment rate is in their city. They live in that city. But they continue to vote for Democrats, even though there's a Republican that's running constantly during the mayoral elections. But they continue to vote for it. So my thing is this. Most people, sensible people, will look at statistics. They will look at crime rates. They will look at unemployment rates. They will look at workforce participation. They will look at their pocketbooks. But then you have a large swath of people that are on the Democrat side who just don't care. They are politically committed to the Democrat Party no matter what. And so that's something that Trump has to break into. And I, would I know the answer to that? Maybe over time I would, but at this present moment, how do you deal with people's emotions and feelings when they don't use logic and reasoning?
Well, let me ask you a question here.
That's what I have to say.
You bring up an interesting point about Maryland. And again, I'm not giving a political commentary on it, but Larry Hogan, I think he was governor. Was it 2 terms in Maryland that Hogan was governor?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And he was a Republican. So how did Maryland vote for a Republican governor, and yet on other national levels, Senate, House of Representatives, mayor, it's almost all Democrats? I'm somewhat perplexed, and I'm sort of looking at that saying, I'm saying there is opportunity there because Larry Hogan was able to break through 2 times.
Well, Larry Hogan was a rhino. Larry Hogan was a pretender of being the conservative, of being the Republican. I mean, that's what he was. I don't know. He had a long-standing beef with Trump. I don't understand why, but Larry Hogan was a rhino. He was literally a Democrat. He was. I mean, when the pandemic hit, Larry Hogan did not look at, let's say, South Dakota or Florida. He looked at New York, which is Democrat ran. He looked at Jersey, which is Democrat ran. He looked at PA, which is Democrat ran, and he pursued their way. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, this is a blue state. So, yeah, Larry Hogan was very masterful of getting elected because he kind of straddled the fence. But at the same time, I voted for the guy twice. No, unfortunately, but there was no one else better. So it was a better, the worst of 2 years. So
better choice.
But yeah, it was a better choice. But nonetheless, here now we have a Democrat governor who he's horrible. Fortunately enough, he was smart enough to tell Kamala Harris, "I'm not interested." But anyways, what's going to happen, I think, is you're going to find both sides of people who are emotional and feeling wise who are going to vote for Democrats. And then you have people who are very logical and analytical and look at their purse and say, hey, listen, I'm losing a lot of money here. I can't afford an electric car that costs $50,000 or $60,000 or $70,000, or even a Cybertruck that gets total recalls. But my point is, it's going to be an interesting election, but it will. I tell you what it will do. In the end, this will show you where America is going to go for the next, I would say, 12 years. That's what this is going to be. This is a break point. This is a watershed moment.
I agree with you. Daren, we're out of time, and I want to thank you for joining me today. And I want to give a plug out to the PAC also, because Autry Pruitt, who we mentioned earlier, has been a guest on my show. They are a terrific duo, these guys. So get out there and support their PAC. And again, thank you for watching today. Thank you for viewing. We'll be back tomorrow with more hard-hitting news on Election Edge. See you tomorrow.